Thank you, everybody. Can you hear me? Yeah? Okay. I must start with a confession. I must say that when Daniel Kaplan asked me to do the wrap-up of this conference in a moment of total unconsciousness, I said yes. And then immediately, a few minutes after, I thought, oh, why the hell, why did I say yes, you know? And now that we reached the end of those 3 days, I do not regret it at all. Because, first of all, it was a really amazing experience, and being obliged to listen carefully to all the sessions that I could attend, I think I got the best of the conference. I got the substance of the conference, and I will try to share some of that substance with you. And of course, I want to thank the organizers for this wonderful conference. Of course, I will not summarize the whole conference unless you want to spend the rest of the evening with me. I will just try to share 14 striking points, 14 things that changed my perception of MyData after those 3 days. But before this, I would like to explain that this is the result of a collective work. The people of Laughing, the staff of Laughing, have been my ears and eyes in all the sessions that I could not attend. And I owe them a lot of the input that led me to this wrap-up. So please thank them with me today. And before diving into my striking points, I would like to insist on the fact that the baseline which was chosen for the conference, make it happen, make it right, was not only a nice slogan like you usually see in conferences. I think it really fits what I have been able to discover here. Of course, some of the projects are not matured, but compared with where we were 4 years ago when I first discovered the VRM approach concept, the progress is clear-cut. MyData is not yet mainstream, obviously, but it's not confidential anymore. And I think that's really essential. The variety of people that I've been able to talk to during this conference, I've seen academics, I've seen startups, I've seen big companies, VCs, local authorities, developers, etc., etc. This is the proof that it's not confidential anymore. And I felt that everybody here was trying to find convergences on key issues so that people try to make it right. So this was a real slogan. So let me share those 14 points into 3 groups. First, what were for me the main points of convergence. I'm sure that there will be others, but those are the main that I could point. Then some points of debate, some points of controversy, and then maybe some missing points that I want to share with you. Starting with, I have it here. Sorry. Starting with the points of convergence. First of all, I think that most people agreed on the fact that we definitely need to give something in exchange if we want users to migrate to services that offer them a control over their data. In a session, some of you have been discussing about the privacy control paradox, the fact that people who say that they want some more privacy, at the same time, they won't use the tools that are offered to them that could use them to improve their privacy. If we put aside the difficulties linked to the learning process of moving from one service to another, we have to take into account that people have been formatted for 20 years to get great services, excellent services, without caring about their data. So we enter what I call a phase of detoxification of people. And if we want to succeed this detoxification process, we need the MyData services to be either fun, as Doc said the other day, or either really useful. Another point of convergence was around the importance of design in such services. Importance of design, of course, in the relation with the user, in the architecture, in the whole service. And many of you have been working on the role of icons in that design. Moving to technology, 2 things struck me. First of all, I got the impression that technology during that conference is in the right place. Let me explain what I mean. If you attend, I'm sure most of you attend many tech-devoted conferences. And when you, digital conferences. And usually what you hear there is that technology is the solution. Technology is at the heart of the conference. And that is what I call technical determinism. And I think this is not what happened here. In contrast, various workshops, various sessions have tried to dispel the fantasies around technology in general and around the blockchain in particular. We know, and sociologists who study innovation have written an awful lot of this, around this. On a very regular basis, a new technology tends to grab all the attention, all the money, all the funding, etc. We've seen that so many times for the last 10 years. You know, it was Web 2.0, remember? It was biotechnologies, nanotechnologies, big data, Internet of Things, and now it's the blockchain. And then it will be something else in 1 year. But, of course, the people here, nobody thinks that technology is not important. But many speeches insisted on the fact that technology is only part of the solution and can also be part of the problem. And I think that this was very healthy. This is very healthy. On a more operational level, the fact that it promotes portability is really a legal tool that we will be able to mobilize for the MyData projects. But I want to make a comment on this. Let's not be naive on that portability. The companies which have been fighting fiercely against the GDPR for years in Brussels corridors, spending millions in lobbying, they will fight again, to get the lightest possible interpretation of the portability. You can already read that in the text, the way it is written now. So we have to remember that the legal tools, they become really useful if they meet a social movement, if they meet a cultural change. And the MyData community, the people who are here, we should all contribute to that social movement. And it leads also to what Rufus Pollock said this morning. It's about politics. But politics, it's not only regulation. It's politics made by the people. Now, I will move to the tension lines that I could feel during this conference. I want to talk about them because I think they could lead us to further discussion for the next conference. The first two tension lines that I felt was around PIMS solutions. The first one, I heard some people promoting vertical approaches of PIMS, PIMS dedicated to energy data, PIMS dedicated to health data, etc., etc. And other PIMS saying, no, no, no. We want a general PIM. We want one place where the person can stock and store their data and have all their different apps dedicated to health, energy, or whatever in the PIM. I think at this stage, this is not really a problem because one does not exclude the other. You can have your data in a dedicated place, but you can also use the apps that will be operating in a more general PIM. The other thing which is more tricky, more complicated, is the fact that, and nobody was talking about this today, no, I mean during the 3 days, we have similar general PIM services that do more or less the same. And of course, we can see them as competitors. I've seen at least 4 of them here during the conference. Maybe more, I don't know, I'm not aware of everybody. There is 2 ways to look at this. Of course, indeed, they are in competition because they are looking for their clients, they are looking for VCs, etc. But if those actors work together, they make the market grow, and there is more to share. I've heard, I don't know if I can talk about this, but I've heard that some of them are considering building a European alliance, and I think this is clearly the right thing to do. Again, if the MyData values is not only about privacy, but also about a different digital market, we should put at distance the winners takes all model that is rotting the digital economy. So co-petition is compulsory if we want MyData to become mainstream. We have to move from a winners takes all to a co-petition takes all. Sorry, I forget my slides, but it's not very important. There's not much on the slides. The third tension appears when we talk about relationships between actors involved in MyData and the public sector. Some of you insisted on the fact that the motto, "Give the data back to the users," should apply as much to the public sector as to the private sector. And let me digress for a second, but I realized, by the way, that there was a strong affiliation between actors involved in open data movement and the people involved in MyData. Of course, the organizers, the Open Knowledge Foundation Finland, but myself, I come from the open data to the MyData. So that's interesting. It's interesting because we have been moving from a collective claim, give back the data to the people who pay taxes with which those data are generated, and now we move to an individual claim, give back to the citizen. So it's a shift. Rufus Pollock talked a little bit about this morning, but I think we should look more into details on this filiation. Coming back to the tension, as some of you insisted on having the public data on board, other fears that this will be built through PPPs, public-private partnership, and that will cut down the relationship between the administration and the citizen and will open the door for the private sector to capture the value of the data. So, if some of you remember the front page of The Guardian when they published that article, "Give us back the crown jewels," maybe some of you remember, they were talking about open data, give us back the public data. And my question is, are we moving from give us back the crown jewels to give away the crown jewels if we consider that the public data might be captured through the PPPs? That's an open question that we need to discuss. The fourth tension regards the relationship to the major pure web players, the GAFAs. I've seen some discussion around this in the online comments, but not in the public space. So I think we should move forward on this. Apparently, the positions among the participants run through a wide range of positions. Some express a clear hostility and a willingness to build an alternative model to what they offer, while some others are willing to cooperate with them and think that they can change the GAFA from the inside. So the first group of people apparently think that any cooperation with those big elephants would lead to an absorption of MyData initiative, as you know, like we have previous example like OpenID, for instance. And others probably think that the GAFA are too strong to fail and that we should just be involved as they have the resources. So I think this discussion should be addressed openly and not only in corridors, as we have been doing for those 3 days. The last tension is directly related to the way we consider the data. Many of you have insisted on the fact that data doesn't fall under a regime of property, but is rooted in our rights. And of course, this is the law. Right for data protection within the broader framework of privacy protection, within the general framework of human rights. But on the other hand, we all have been more or less intoxicated with the stupid metaphor, sorry to be straightforward, but the stupid metaphor of data being oil. And so we tend to consider data as a good that can therefore be owned, then be the property of someone. And we are not clear-cut about this. We are very ambiguous about this. I heard one of the keynote speakers yesterday afternoon say that the problem is that there is no property over the platforms. She was not talking about property of the data, but property of the platform. But still, she was pushing forward the property as a solution. And here, I disagree. I think that we should stop talking about owning our data. We don't own them. If we own them, then we start thinking in terms of property. We should anchor them to the rights, to the fundamental rights. And we should clearly refuse those approaches of people who want to monetize the personal data in exchange of openness. I mean, here I think it's a strong point of discussion. Rufus Pollock this morning talked about information as a common, moving away from intellectual property. Of course, personal data is not a common, that's not the point. But along the line of what Rufus said this morning, we have to run away from the proprietary ideology. We've been trapped for 1.5 centuries now, or even more, in this proprietary philosophy as the solution for every problem. And now I come to my missing pieces, if I may say so. 4 of them. In my perception, our approach of the digital economy is too narrow. Let me explain. We focus on the privacy issue related to personal data and on the apparent contradiction between innovation and data protection. But we need to zoom back on the economy at large. We tend to think in silos. Data protection on the one hand, competition law on the other hand, tax evasion on the third hand, etc. I don't know how many hands we should have, but many hands. But all this is related. There would not be such a strong data protection problem if people could move to other services instead of being trapped in monopolistic or oligopolistic markets. There wouldn't be such a strong personal data protection problem if we had not accepted to build our digital economy on two-sided actors, one side being not directly monetized. Our economy has moved drastically from an economy of acquisition, I buy my clothes, my food, my access to a newspaper, and now we have moved to the so-called attention economy. I think it is time for us to discuss about this attention economy per se. Attention economy is not given forever. It is fragile. We can see that. I think Danielle mentioned it in the first speech, in the opening session. Attention economy creates a speculative bubble. And you know what happened with speculative bubbles. So we need to embrace together this main issue. How do we move out of the attention economy, and how do the MyData actors contribute to this refoundation of our digital economy? The second missing point, I think, is about governance. Several people have said during the 3 days that we should, all together, we should contribute to democracy. I strongly agree, of course. But democracy is not only a question of politics or, public bodies. Democracy starts within the companies, within the startups. The MAIF explained yesterday that as a mutual company, they are an old-fashioned wiki company. They come from what we call the social economy. MyData.coop in Switzerland have chosen to be a cooperative. But what about the others? I haven't heard much discussion around this. We should, I think, grab some lessons from what happened to the so-called collaborative economy or sharing economy. If we do not build a democratic governance from scratch when we create companies, if we do not think from scratch how we're going to share the value that the company is creating with our customers, with our shareholders, with the workers, if we do not think about that governance and value sharing, we can't do it afterwards. I can tell you, I've seen various companies working in the collaborative economy trying to move to a more open governance model, and they're having a real hard time. The third missing piece relates somehow to the previous one. And maybe for me it's the most tricky one. We have been focusing for 3 days on the individual alone. Some people have been talking about the Internet of Me, the person as the platform, the API of Me, the ecosystem, etc., etc. I'm not quoting them all, but you've heard that. So we have been totally me-centered. In many sessions, I have heard people talking about giving responsibility to the user, giving responsibility to manage their data, responsibility to monitor their health, responsibility to measure their working time, etc., etc., etc. And I feel quite uncomfortable with all this because we focus on the isolated individual. Let me explain why I feel uncomfortable. 2 reasons. I think that we all want to empower people. We've been saying that in several sessions, giving agency, etc. I think my fear is that we turn the individual into a kind of digital beast of burden. Not everyone wants or can or have the skills, the cognitive capital, to take such responsibilities on an everyday basis. And he or she might, at the end of the day, have a strong feeling of loneliness. So that's one of my concerns. The second one is due to the fact that we tend to forget the fundamental asymmetry of power that exists in society and in economy. Shifting all the responsibility to the isolated individual is paving the way for more abuse of power from organizations. So why am I saying that? I'm not saying that we should forget about the MyData approach, not at all. Let's not think that. But I think we need to bring back into the picture the community, the crowd, the strengths of collective action. Doc yesterday was calling on participation. Let's put participation in this sense, in the very center of the way we think about data. Concretely, what does that mean? Let me take two examples. We have seen in two different workshops or sessions wonderful projects that monitor the terms and services of various companies. What can we do with this? Okay, this company, oh, they behave not so good. Oh, okay, shame, shame, shame. Other sessions have been talking about algorithms that make disloyal recommendations. Disloyal in the sense that they have been paid to push some contents instead of sticking to your own preferences. What can we do about this? Algorithm, they should be more transparent, la, 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 la. And that's it. No, of course, an individual alone can't do anything in front of an algorithm. Of course, or in front of terms and services. I think it is about time to start having class action around our digital rights in countries where class action are possible. And it is about time to fight to have this right in other countries where it is not possible. For instance, in France. In France, you can't have a class action for immaterial goods, how they call it. Another idea, for example, would be to build platforms, crowdsourced platform, where the crowd could could put online example of disloyal behaviors from companies. You know, use the name and shame approach. You know that all those elephants, they are very sensitive to their reputation. Let's use it. But we can't, one individual alone can't do it. We have to do that together. Let's crowdsource that. So what I mean, we could, search for more actions that we can do together. But what I mean is, let's not be naive and think that giving back power to the individual is enough. We need at the same time to build collective action without waiting for the regulator to do this for us. And one last missing piece. We all know that collecting and storing data has a high energy impact. Except for Rufus Pollock this morning, who briefly mentioned that. I think I haven't heard once, but I haven't been everywhere, but I haven't heard once anyone talking about environmental transition. And we cannot escape that. We cannot avoid it. So data has a high energy impact. How do we embrace that problem? So how can we contribute to a form of data frugality? That's my last open question. It's not the easiest one, I know, but I think it's food for thoughts for next year. Thank you for your attention.